this morning. We take this time, you might be new to Living Rock, we take this time around tables because we really value the interaction, the face-to-face with other believers. In fact, if you were to look at where growth happens and how we learn, only 5% is really done through a lecture style. And so a lot of what we learn and how we grow is as we talk and discuss things together. And that's really the heart of why we do that. We also have children around the table because we believe that the next generation needs to know what God has done and watch us as we live out our lives of faith before the Lord. And they hear the stories of his faithfulness, that they can be encouraged and grow in that as well. So that's why the kids are in this room. The message today will definitely gear towards children. I got some hand motions or things that will help in memorization. For some of you who are adults, it might not be as intellectually stimulating, although I hope it's helpful. You might actually learn some things this morning, but definitely going to gear towards some of the children in the room this morning. As a church, we are going through the book of Micah, and we're going to enter into this prophetic book next week. Josiah's going to take us through chapters 1 through 3. But if you might think of Micah and you say, I've never even heard of that book. That is a book of the Old Testament. Is actually called a minor prophet, not because he's not as good as the other prophets that we would call major, but it's really an amount of words that are spoken in the book. And what we have given out through our church is these little booklets that are like journaling. They give you an opportunity to read the book of Micah, journal, write your notes. And we really want you to engage with this book as a church. One thing that Micah starts out, and you'll see next week, there's a lot of judgment and God saying, I've asked you to do this and you're not doing it. And so he comes down pretty hard on the nation of Israel in the first 3 chapters. And Josiah will navigate that with us next week. But what I felt like as I was reading through that is that we need to know what they had abandoned, what God had set up for them, and what they were abandoning or disobeying or going their own way in. And so this morning, we're going to do something that maybe if you've been in church, you've heard these before. It's definitely out in our culture, although becoming less and less common. But maybe you've heard the term the 10 Commandments. And some of you, that might initially rise up this like, oh yeah, all these rules God gave us in order to follow. But what I want to say to you this morning is that these are actually God's heart of love to us. It's really from a heart as a father to his children saying, this is my best. This is how I've designed us to be in relationship. And this is what I want you to know. And so as we begin to walk through these 10 commandments, my hope and my prayer is that they come alive to you in a new way. And maybe things that you felt, oh, that's irrelevant, that's Old Testament. They actually begin to see this was a system, this was a way in which God set up for us to know him, to love him, and to love others. And so we'll talk about that this morning. The Israelite people were coming out of Egypt. They were coming out of slavery. And in Exodus 19, we read this. God said, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine. He starts out by saying, look, I brought you out of slavery, and now I'm going to tell you how to live in your newfound freedom. My pastor, growing up, he wrote a book called The Tender Commandments. And instead of the 10 commandments being this strong, like do it, thou shalt not, this is kind of restrictive, it was really focusing on God's heart of love, saying this is what I want you to do. This is how I've designed for you to live. In fact, they're written by the very finger of God. And so you think of a father writing to his children and saying, hey, this is how life works best. This is the 10 Commandments to each one of us this morning. Would you pray with me as we begin? And then we're going to be in Exodus 20. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and open up there, and we'll walk through those this morning. Father, we thank you that you love us enough to give guidance and direction. You created each one of us. Every person in this room is fearfully and wonderfully made. You knit us together in our mother's womb. You know what it looks like for us to know you, to love you, and to love others. So may this morning we even become more and more aware of the good things that you have for us through these commandments. And may we hear them from a voice of love, a Father who cares for us. We thank you for your presence here today. May your Spirit work. Amen. Exodus 20 is where we're going to be at, and it starts in this way. It says, "And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery." Again, God starts with reminding them, this is what I have done for you. I'm bringing you into freedom, into new life, and now I have some commandments or ways for you to live. Now, I'm going to be using my hands. We got 10 fingers, right? So some of you may know this, some of you may not, but this is a really helpful reminder for how we can remember these 10 commandments. So the first one, verse 3, as we get into it, it says, "You shall have no other gods before me." All right, you got your thumb, right? So if you hold up your thumb and you look at your thumb, everything around it is blurry, right? If you focus on your thumb, everything else goes blurry. This is God's desire. We look to him first. You shall have no other gods before me. If I start looking around at all of you, what happens to your thumb? You don't see it as much, right? It becomes kind of a vague, distant. So first one, kids, this is good for you, right? Easy, thumb up. His desire is for us to be in relationship with him and to know him and follow him before anything else. No other gods before me. He has created us for relationship with him. Jesus said, "Man shall not live on bread alone, but by every word that comes from the Father." Our life, our sustenance, who we are, comes as we keep him first in our lives, as we focus towards him. So we see, you shall have no other gods before me. Second commandment, you can hold your finger up like this. Kind of think of it like a pole or an idol, a statue. You can be like carving it up or whatever. You shall. So the verse 4, it actually is 4 through 6, says this: "You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness or of anything that is in heaven above, or is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments." You see that God doesn't want us to worship anything else but him, keeping him first and not allowing our worship, our heart, our lives to be given to idols. You see a little bit of this sense that he is a jealous God and he wants our love. As in a marriage where a husband and wife, they want unity, they want together, they want to be the only one to love one another. There should be no other wife or man in that relationship that takes even as close to that covenant marriage. And so God is saying, I want to be first, and I don't want anything to take my place. Romans 1:23 says this: "Claiming to be wise," Paul is speaking to people who have abandoned God, "they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things." We begin to worship the creature rather than the creator. God's saying there should be no one else. Third one, middle finger. Not a great finger if you hold it up on its own, right? Enough said. You can ask your parents maybe if you want to at home about that one. But let's just say, middle finger, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. God's name is to be holy. There's a reverence to him. It's not this demanding, harsh, but there's a recognition that we worship an all-powerful God who created the universe. And there's a holiness and a separateness to him. And so we don't use his name in jest. We're aware that we are speaking to a God who is holy and powerful. It reminds me of how Jesus said to begin our prayers, "Our Father in heaven, holy is your name." For each one of us, we have the opportunity to make holy his name. Third one. Fourth one. If you don't know it, this is your weakest finger. Fourth finger, least used. Dexterity-wise, it's I don't know what the right word, dexter. No, that's not right. I don't know. It's not very, there's not a lot of dexterity to it. I can't think of a better way to say it. But this is a good reminder. It's a weak finger. And the fourth commandment is, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shall you labor and do all your work, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant or your livestock or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and he rested on the seventh. He left us an example. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. God is reminding us we all need rest. We're not strong enough to just keep going 7, 14, 21 days. And that there is a joy that he invites us into in that rest. Enjoying the work of the hands. God made this world and then he rested. And he was like, this is good. Do we take days of rest? Do we recognize that if we just go and push harder and harder, we will burn out? We're weak. We need him. So much more could be said about these. And I'm doing a brief overview, but it's a good basis for us to remember God gave us these so that we would know him. In fact, these first 4 are all about relationship with God. The first 4 are all about our relationship with him and his desire to be in relationship with us and to be the only one that we serve, the first in our lives. The last 6 are all about how we keep relationship and love one another. When Jesus said the greatest commandment, love God and love others, sums up the law and the prophets, the 10 commandments really were a greater explanation. First 4, what does it look like to love God? The second 6, or the last 6, what does it look like to love others? And that's where we're heading now. We get to the pinky, littlest finger. I don't know about this one, a little bit creative, but pinky's up, like kind of proper, prim and proper. Your parents probably told you, hey, be polite around the table. So you think about your parents, honoring them and their request, pinky up, a little T, high T. Honor your father and mother that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. It is not uncommon today, and especially in our culture, to dishonor parents. To look at them and only list all the mistakes they have made and not really recognize the life that they've done, the way that they have tried their best to pour into us. So much of our culture wants to just kind of push them aside. Your parents are crazy. They don't know what they're talking about. Look at all the hurt they did to you. And there is not an honoring of them. God recognizes that. And he knows that is kind of built up in our hearts as we grow. We want to just kind of push off and say, you know what, I got my own way. But he is saying, honor your father and your mother. This is your first relationship. Every one of us has a father and mother. So honor your father and mother. The next two, these both originate, Jesus said, out of the heart. So we got this one right here. Next pinky on your left hand. You got it? Everybody got it? I'm going to quiz you at the end, and you're going to have to stand up and do this. So, no, I'm just kidding. Little sword, little dagger, right? You know, a little side slice on somebody. No murder. You shall not murder. Again, this might seem like obvious and clear, but it becomes less and less as we live in a culture that's abandoning God. God is the creator and author of life, both beginning and end. It is in his hands. It's not to be taken into control. He cares about life and any negligent or willful taking of it. He says this will not promote unity. This will not build up a culture that loves one another as murder is present. And in fact, Jesus showed us where murder begins. It begins with anger. When we start to get angry, you're right. When we start to get angry, we can begin to actually have thoughts of murder towards those around us. In fact, you can easily murder someone. They're dead to me in your heart without ever physically doing that act. I believe Jesus was identifying, don't allow that to even start. Offer forgiveness. Recognize the forgiveness I've given you and forgive others. Ring finger, right? Marriage. Again, a weak finger, you're better together. But the ring finger, you shall not commit adultery. Adultery, again, starts in the heart with a look, a longing outside of the covenant of marriage. And God recognizes that in that moment, as adultery happens, not only is harm brought to one family, but two. It is one of the greatest tragedies where sin actually goes out and corrupts two different families. And he's saying, this is not the way we can love one another well. Stay away from adultery. It starts in our heart. It starts with a look and a longing. And those should be warning signs to say, God, I need your spirit. Move me back towards your heart. I know this will only produce death and corruption in the lives of those around me. Keep me centered on you. And then we go back to number 8. These next two deal with honesty. So you can think of this one. What do you do with this hand? You might grab, right? Which one do you grab with? That middle finger. You grab out, you reach, you pull things in. That's usually what you reach out and grab with. Don't steal. I love it. These girls, you guys got it. You got it down right there. You're practicing. Exactly. Very good. It'll lock into your memory that way. Don't steal. Don't take what's not yours. This shows God's heart for our possession. He recognizes that when we have things, it's important. And we're not to violate another person by going in and taking something that is not rightfully ours. I remember when we lived in Oak Harbor, we got our house broken into and things stolen out of it. And the things that we lost were, there were some great things. And it was a bummer to lose those. But the biggest part was this sense of kind of violation, that somebody walked into your house and took what was yours. So God is saying that is not to be a part of this new community. We're supposed to honor and respect what others have. And in fact, when we're tempted to steal, sometimes it may be out of just a desire to have more. Sometimes it may be out of a desire to say, God, I don't think you're going to provide for me, so I need to take it, right? I'm not going to file my taxes correctly. Oh, I'm stealing from what is lawfully supposed to be given to the government. Those are things and ways in which we can kind of compromise on this, and yet it's not producing good fruit. It will not. Ultimately, it's a mistrust in God. So you shall not steal. And then we come to the 9th commandment. Pointer finger. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. This does primarily in a legal sense, like if you're in a court of law and somebody asked you, did this happen? And you lie about it, that's primarily where this focuses. But can you imagine if this was true in our country where there was actually just truth spoken? That when we watched the media or we listened to the government, we knew what was spoken was the truth. Can you imagine the trust that would be built up in our community and in this nation? But it's as we've abandoned this, and there's a passive and an active way to abandon this. Passively, we might not say that somebody did something wrong, right? We might cover over it by just like, I'm not going to mention that was actually really wrong, but you know what? I'm going to overlook it. And we're not addressing those things that need to be brought up and said, no, that's really not right what happened. And then actively, it's when we go and we actually twist the truth. Or we just speak a lie about somebody. It breaks trust, and that is a foundation of a culture. God recognizes this. He designed us. He knows how we best are designed to live. And so he's giving us these out of a heart of love, saying, as you live this out among you, it'll be good. And then finally, we come back to the thumb. We come back to the thumb. And it says, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male servant or his female servant or his ox or his donkey or his car or his, pool, whatever it is. Anything that is your neighbor's. If you're looking over your neighbor's fence and wishing you had the greener grass, I think it's TTY, tend to your own, right? You do a little TTYO, I think that's what it's called. Tend to your own, it'll get green too, right? You might look over, oh, wow, that looks so good. I wish I had that. And what it's spurring out of is a heart that's ungrateful for what God has given you. And so for both of these commandments, keep me first and don't covet, it really pours out of a heart that's ungrateful for what God has given us. And when we look at him and say, God, I'm just thankful for what you have given me, the family, the relationships, the people, the house, the home. I'm thankful. I'm not looking at the next person and discontented with what you have provided for me today. It's a commandment to think, God, you give me what I need and you sustain me. Jesus said it in Luke 12. He said, take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. These are the commandments that God had given the children of Israel to follow and to walk in. To recognize that this was his heart of love, saying, if you follow these, it'll be good. And as we get into the book of Micah, we'll see a people that began to abandon God's way. But what I love is that we will also see the hope that Jesus brings. That he has provided a way for us to be back in relationship with our Father in heaven. That even though we've walked away from his commandments, he will provide a way for us to once again know our Father in heaven and be filled with his Spirit. This is the good news of the gospel that will then write these laws on our hearts and we live them out with those around us. We love God and we love others. As we come to discussion around the table, we'll put some questions up here. And I hope that maybe you've heard these 100 times, or maybe actually today was really helpful. You're like, wow, the 10 Commandments, I just thought those were Old Testament things. And they're not relevant. They are helpful in being specific about how to help daily interactions with those around us. And as we ask the Holy Spirit, come alive in me, he will cause us to live these out in loving one another, loving God and loving others well.